Welcome to the Holy Land and this biblical site of Tel Dan. We are shooting this talk right in front of the altar here and the high place. So the significant thing that happened here in Tel Dan that we're going to be talking about, and of course we're going to be talking about some of the backstory so we really fully understand this place. Right here where the steel is, that was the altar. And then up above that was a platform, and that is what Jeroboam did. He built two altars with golden calves. One was in Bethel, which is south. That's kind of in the southern part of the northern tribes. And then in Tel Dan, he built this golden calf. Now what takes place here is pivotal because this is now going to be the beginning point, the first chapter in the downfall of the 10 tribes of Israel and their eventual deportation. So at this biblical site, we'll be looking at the location of this place and why that's so important. We'll talk about the historical background of this location. We'll be looking at some of the amazing places of interest at this site. We'll see the key events in the Bible that took place here. And we'll end with the faith lesson in order to learn the major lessons God desires for us from this important biblical site. So I think you'll find this video very enlightening and transforming to your life. Now the location of the city of Dan is in the northernmost part of Israel, about 24 miles or 38 kilometers north of the Sea of Galilee. It is in a well-watered, lush area which is superb for agriculture. It's at the base of Mount Hermon, which is Israel's highest mountain. The mountain provides most of the water for the Jordan River and the northern part of Israel. Now this mighty city of Dan was located on the crossroads of major ancient travel routes. Of these, the main travel route was called the Via Maris, which linked Africa and Egypt with Asia and Europe. The earliest findings from a settlement at Tel Dan date to around 5,000 years BC. Later, a city was built here during the Canaanite period in around 2700 BC. The Canaanite city was approximately 50 acres or 25 hectares in size and dates to around 1850 BC. It was surrounded by a wall which reached a height of 30 to 50 feet or 10 to 15 meters and was around 25 feet or 7 meters wide at its base. The Tel is identified also with the city of Laish, or also known as Leshem, and was captured by the tribe of Dan in the period of the Judges. The tribe of Dan found it difficult to deal with the Philistines in the area which they were allotted, which was between Jerusalem and the Mediterranean Sea, and therefore decided to go north in search of new territory. In Judges 18:27 it says, "They proceeded to Laish, a people tranquil and unsuspecting, and they put them to the sword and burned down the town. There was none to come to the rescue, for it was distant from Sidon. They rebuilt the town and settled there, and they named the town Dan, after their ancestor Dan, who was one of Jacob's sons." After conquering the city, the Danites renamed the city to Dan in around 1350 BC. When referring to Israel, the phrase is often used which says, "from Dan to Beersheba." It says in 1 Kings 4:25, "Judah and Israel lived safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon." So once again, this was a phrase that was used. Beersheba was to the southernmost part of Israel, and Dan here was in the northernmost part. Now, in order to help you understand and appreciate all that happened here, let's take a tour and show you all the places of interest at this amazing site. We'll start at the park entrance, which is on the west side of the city, and move to the east side of the park. And you can see a map here of what we'll be looking at. And as we go through the tour, we'll be referencing this map as well. So we'll start with the park entrance. From here, visitors enter and are introduced to an amazing historical site that encompasses both rich blessings and deep sin and destruction. And we'll be talking about this later on in the video. Entering the Tel Dan Reserve is like stepping into a wonderland. There are many bubbling brooks that feed into a large running river. Tall treetops reach for the sky, and the ground is always shaded and refreshingly cool, even at noon on a hot summer's day. It's no wonder that some 7,000 years ago, people chose this area by these springs as the spot to make their homes and set up their civilizations. Now, the water source for Tel Dan comes from a massive spring. It is one of the most plentiful springs in the Middle East and is fed by the snow that accumulates on Mount Hermon every winter and then trickles down to the springs at the foot of the hill. This massive spring produces cool water at a steady temperature throughout the year. Of the three sources of the Jordan River, the Dan stream, which originates here, is the largest and most important. The remains of a number of flour mills were found here at Tel Dan, which used the strong current of the water to turn the millstones and grind flour. The flour mill that can be seen today was in operation until the 1960s. The mill was built about 150 years ago and operated on water power until 1948. The mill has 2 pairs of millstones. There is also a Pooh Bear tree named after Winnie the Pooh. Now, this is a large, old, narrow-leaved ash tree whose trunk is hollow, and as a result, it attracts both children and adults. In the past, there were other trees on the slopes of Tel Dan, such as the Palestinian oak and the Mount Aslis mastic tree, but these were destroyed by fire due to the negligence of hikers. There is also a place called the Pistachio Lookout named after a tree. The circumference of the tree is more than 6 meters around. A beautiful shady place in the park is called the Wading Pool, and this is a shallow pool that is part of the hiking trail. It's an excellent place to get your feet wet in the cool and refreshing waters of the pool. It has also been recently expanded and surrounded by a wooden deck and benches. The wading pool is the only place in the park where it's permitted to get into the water and play and paddle around. Towards the center of Tel Dan is a place called the Garden of Eden, or also Paradise Springs. This area consists of calmly babbling brooks, creating channels along which a well-developed riverside forest grows. This is the only place in Israel with a wetland forest of northern trees. This forest is shady throughout the year and is home to many climbing-type species of plants. Cool bubbling springs flow from the base of this area around the trees, and they're populated by rare salamanders and invertebrates. It consists of 2 major springs called the Tel and Leshem Springs. Now, next we see this false god worship site that Jeroboam set up. And we'll be talking more about this in detail, but just a brief overview here. In 930 BC, the kingdom was divided, and Jeroboam established false god worship centers in Bethel and here in Dan. He erected a golden calf in Dan and built a building to house the sacrificial high places. The altar stood in front of this large platform surrounded by finely chiseled stones. A metal frame that you can see here indicates what the shape and size would have been. What I want to show you up close here is the altar. So we have the altar right here, and you can see the size that it would have been. You can see the stones here. So this was the altar. Here is where they sacrificed the animals. Up here is where the platform for the golden calf was at. So the sacrifices were made here to this golden calf. So as we mentioned, in the same way in Jerusalem you had an altar in front of the temple to the true and living God. Here you had an altar to this false god, this golden calf. Near this area, archaeologists discovered a round reservoir from the Hellenistic period, as well as animal bones. On the western side of the site, the team uncovered small altar rooms and priestly chambers with special implements or utensils for offering incense, which included shovels and other various items. On the massive platform that you can see here is where the golden calf that Jeroboam erected was located. And we'll talk more about this later on in our talk about this site. So what I want to show you here now is we had the altar down below, and then right up here was the platform. And then the golden calf sat up here on the platform, large golden calf, huge. And then once again the altar down there where they sacrificed to this golden calf right here. Now there's also a command post lookout here. Now these trenches served the Israelite defense forces until the Six-Day War in 1967. They show a view of the old patrol road, the slopes of Mount Hermon, the abandoned Syrian outpost of Nukhela, and the village of El Hiyam in Lebanon. Now, as you can see in the front of this gate is a large plaza. This would be an area where the townspeople would gather, they would meet, they would talk, they would just fellowship and get together. Also, in front of the gate is a bench or small raised platform on which the ruler or judge of the city would sit. It's possible this is where the delegations made offerings to the king of the city. At the base are small decorated stone pots that are believed to have been used for supporting a canopy over the small platform. Just to the side, along the wall, is a bench that was likely used for the elders or prominent leaders of the city. So in the Bible, it talks a lot about the elders, the leaders, the kings, the judges, meeting and sitting at the gate entrances. So you can get a good idea of what that would have been like. So in the plaza area, once again, the people would meet, but at the entrance there was this seat and then the bench for the elders. And this is where they would hear cases or talk with people and do important, prominent things. When this inner gate was unearthed, there was an amazing discovery of a doorstop and hinge sockets from which giant wooden doors once would have swung. Now also around this main city gate entrance is evidence of some cultic worship items. Now we know that this is quite certain because it says that when the Danites were traveling north to conquer the city of Laish, they stopped in Ephraim and stole household gods from a man named Micah. They also brought his own false priest to bring to Dan and lead them in their own false worship. So there is evidence of this cultic worship here at the entrance of the gate. And you can see these cultic stones which have been found here that testify to this fact. Now just inside this main massive outer gate and just up the hill a bit is the inner gate location of Dan that the Israelites had built here as well. So both this outer gate and this inner gate are both now from the Israelite period, starting in around 1350 BC when the tribe of Dan captured this area. Around this city gate and just inside are traces of ruins in which archaeologists have excavated and found residential houses of the city which date to the time of the Canaanites and the Israelites. Another amazing discovery here at Tel Dan is an ancient Canaanite gate. And this was found here in 1979. It's 23 feet high or 7 meters high, and it's made out of brick. And it has 47 courses that are still preserved. The most remarkable discovery from this part of the tell is that the gate remained completely intact. Its arch-shaped lintel is one of the earliest complete arches found in the world and one of the only ones still standing. Now this Canaanite gate is also known or called Abraham's gate, as it's very likely Abraham was here and possibly entered through this gate. In Genesis 14:14, the Bible speaks about this possibility. It says, "When Abram, who was later called Abraham, heard that his relative had been taken," speaking about Lot, he led out his trained men, born in his house, 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So for this reason, this gate here is also called Abraham's Gate. Now, as you can see, a large canopy has been placed over this gate to protect it from weather and erosion. Now, another fascinating discovery here at Tel Dan is a piece of stela, or an engraved stone tablet from around 850 BC that was unearthed here in 1993. Carved into this stone tablet is an inscription of Hazael, king of Damascus, boasting of his victory over the king of Israel and the king of the house of David. Now, this is the first time that the words house of David were found outside of the Bible. So they have been found here in this discovery here, which gives evidence that the Bible is true, that King David did exist, and his kingdom to the south and even over all of Israel was in existence. Now, in order to fully understand and appreciate all that took place here, let's set the stage and look at the background of everything that took place here. So now we're going to talk about this event from the Bible and learn what all really happened here. So this is going to be an exciting and meaningful yet sobering time as we look here at what happened. Now, as mentioned, the Canaanites inhabited the land in this area from about 5,000 to 1400 BC. The conquest of the Promised Land under Joshua took place in about 1400 BC, and it was sometime after that that the Danites came here. So sometime later, probably in around 1350 BC or shortly thereafter, the tribe of Dan relocated from central Israel to this place. When they did so, they brought some false gods with them and began to worship God in a backwards, unbiblical way. They conquered this area and named the town Dan. In around 930 BC, because of King Solomon's disobedience in his latter years, the kingdom of Israel was divided. Rehoboam took the southern 2 tribes of Israel, and Jeroboam took the northern 10 tribes. From this point on, as found in 1 Kings 11, the name Israel would refer to the northern 10 tribes, and Judah would refer to the southern 2 tribes. So as we find in 1 Kings 11 and forward, Israel would be a divided kingdom. It was under Jeroboam's reign that this altar and the altar in Bethel was set up to worship golden calves that he made. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. It should be noted, however, that under Josiah's reign in about 640 BC, he somewhat united the kingdom and had power and influence in the northern part of Israel. Now, it should be mentioned that after the northern 10 tribes were deported in around 722 BC, that some people will call them, these 10 tribes that were deported, the 10 lost tribes of Israel. However, this is really not the case. When Jeroboam set up his false god worship, as we saw, many who feared the Lord fled and went to live in Judah and Jerusalem. Additionally, when the king of Assyria was conquering the northern 10 tribes of Israel from around 730 to 700 BC, many fled to Jerusalem from the northern 10 tribes and lived on the western hill of the city of Jerusalem. It would be King Hezekiah who would build a wall around this refugee camp, so to speak, prior to King Sennacherib's attempt to destroy Jerusalem in around 701 BC. Well, thank you for watching part 1 of this video. Please watch part 2, where we'll talk about the important and sobering things that happened here from the Bible and faith lessons God has for us today that we can learn from this biblical site.